let's just get right into the video. I'm gonna get a little sippy first though. I'm feeling quite parched, which is no fun at all. I'm trying to set this down very quietly. Okay. Let's see. So, this article is titled 11 Paranormal Investigators Reveal Their Most Bone-Chilling Experiences with the Other Side. And it is by Stephanie Shannon, and I will link it down below in case you like to read along as I read to you, which some of you do, if I remember correctly. Anyway, night 14, here we go. Whether you're a skeptic or a surefire believer in the paranormal, we can all admit that there's a lot of mystery surrounding the afterlife. As a natural-born skeptic, I was so sure that ghosts, spirits, and aliens were just a figment of the imagination. That is, until I experienced some things that I could just not find a logical explanation for. Some brave men and women move headfirst into the unknown and try to contact the other side, hoping to get answers that the rest of us are dying to know more about. From my close ties in the paranormal community, I was able to ask some great friends to share that world with you. These are the experiences that made their blood run cold. Number 1. One of my most memorable and bone-chilling experiences was actually about 4 years ago at the Beauvoir. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. Beauvoir Confederate Cemetery in Biloxi, Mississippi. It was myself and a few other investigators. It was January, so it was quite cold out. As we approached the cemetery, the K2 meter was going all the way to the red, but we couldn't attribute it to anything as there were no power lines or anything electric that could have been giving off EMF nearby, which EMF is electromotive force. It has that in parentheses. They use EMF readers to ghost hunt. Anyway, nothing would be giving off EMF nearby since we were in a cemetery. We kept walking, and I turned the spirit box on and asked, "Is there anyone here with us right now?" I immediately heard a deep, eerie voice come through the spirit box and say, "Humans." I knew at that moment that whoever or whatever that voice was coming from was not human. It sent chills through my body, and I immediately asked, "Are you not human?" But I received no response. I didn't hear that voice come through again, and to this day, I don't know who or what I was speaking with. My feeling is that it may have been extraterrestrial, but I've never come across something like that again, and I still think about it every time I investigate. This was contributed by Mackenzie Conjure-Casino, co-founder of XX Paranormal in Colorado. XX Paranormal. Number 2. The experience that reminds me as more creepy was in Mississippi at the Jefferson Davis Estate. We were in the Confederate graveyard, and out of nowhere, I started coughing. And I know this sounds weird, it wasn't me coughing, and that's what I said. It felt like someone else was coming through me. When we all got back to the little cabin we were staying in, Jocelyn, the medium who was with us, but who had not been in the graveyard, woke up and said, "Where's Christine?" I looked at her and she said, "There is a woman from the graveyard who attached her energy to you. She wants to tell you something about her health. She has a message for you." We went back to the graveyard the next day, and in the area I several times that she could talk to me there, but she could not come home with me. Over the next couple of weeks at home, I would get the same random cough, and I would tell Laura that she needed to go back home. It finally stopped after about a month. This story was by Christine Thiessen Hendrickson, also from Colorado. Story number 3. It was my first public investigation, leading about 30 people through an old mill building in Manchester, New Hampshire. It was built in the early 1900s as a textile mill on the Merrimack River. Turned into, it might be Merrimack. I said Merrimack like I was in Missouri. Turned into a modern private studio/businesses, and it had recently been bought out to be renovated into new office space. We had the entire building to ourselves, with all of the businesses having been pushed out, exploring and investigating each of the 3 floors, and eventually down into the basement, and then into an even deeper level basement. There was a reputable psychic medium in attendance, and she, as well as several others, were drawn off to one side of the room, where a large hole seemed to have been blasted out of the brick wall. Approaching the hole and crouching down to peer inside, that's a no from me. I could feel a steady cold breeze, colder than the already freezing basement, coming from the other side. Upon shining a light beyond the rubble, I could make out 2 distinct tunnels, one shooting off to the right, seemingly spanning the length of the building, and one going off to the left. Wondering the purpose and where these tunnels led, I stared into the dark tunnel on the right with a flashlight, only allowing my sight to maybe reach 10 to 15 feet back. I saw a white mist manifest and move from left to right across the entrance of the tunnel just with my naked eye. I set up a camera and a laser grid shining into the hole and down the tunnel on the right. We turned the lights out, and I turned on my best communication device, asking if whoever was there would mind showing themselves. Again, moving across the tunnel entrance. There was a with the green that came through at the time, and I confirmed yes through the green laser lights. Myself and several others stood patiently waiting, crouched in front of the tunnel, our eyes peering out in the darkness, afraid to blink for fear of missing something. Seconds after, we all witnessed a comet-like energy fly down from the tunnel, out of the hole in the wall, above my head, the camera catching the laser beams being affected by the movement of an unseen mass, and the communication device saying, "They're watching," at the same time. My fiance's energy was completely drained, and later that night was later told that she experienced an attempted attachment that night in the basement. Once safely outside and cleansed, the psychic described a face she saw with a wide open mouth as the energy that flew out of the hole. I only wish we were able to get a name. There is a link to this video evidence of this story on their Instagram at Spectral Visions Paranormal. I don't know if I want to watch that. This was told by Natasha Dominguez, founder of Spectral Visions Paranormal. Yeah, if I saw faces flying at me out of the dark, I would not be there anymore. Number 4. I was investigating at an old hotel in Victor, Colorado, I believe, where there were no other occupants except our team. Even the front desk employee would go home, and we would have to call them if we needed assistance. I and another investigator were doing EVP, which is a voice recorder session in the lobby, where there was a piano that had a sign on it that said, "Please do not touch." Usually I would obey the sign, but you have to sometimes go against the rules when investigating, so I began playing the piano. After a short time, my partner said, "Dude, you're so gonna get in trouble." And nothing significant happened, so we moved on. in trouble. Separate from the initial whisper. A few seconds later, you hear the same whisper again say, "You're gonna get in trouble," in the same Nana Nana Boo Boo song-like way. It was incredible. Neither of us had heard that at all during the investigation, but it was clear as day, and twice on the EVP. The story was contributed by Randy Patton, also of Colorado. This person must know lots of people in Colorado, or Colorado's very haunted. Number 5. My husband and I were investigating, I went down too far, an old opera house. Cool. It was set up on the second floor of a building that had been constructed in the late 1800s. At the time, it was only the two of us in the opera house, as the rest of our team was in the pub down one floor and on the other side of the building. We sat in a booth and tried to use our spirit box to get some sort of communication going. As the spirit box was scanning, we could pick out 2 different voices, saying phrases that didn't make much sense to us. At one point, a soft voice said, 4 weeks. So naturally, I asked what they meant by that. A deep, stern voice came over the spirit box and said, "Stop talking." We then realized that the stern spirit was not speaking to us. It was speaking to the softer spirit and being pretty aggressive about not wanting them to give us any details. We pressed on anyway and tried to ask more questions. Suddenly, we hear a loud bang from behind our booth, coming from the pitch black hallways. It sounded like a metal bowl had been thrown with force and clattered against something else. The mood instantly got very dark and made us feel anxious, which has never happened to us before. For 2 people who have never run away from anything during an investigation, we sure got out of that opera house pretty quick. That was submitted anonymously. Number 6. Having been sensitive to the paranormal all my life, I feel obligated to find answers. One of my recent experiences was at one of our own team members' homes. We had a psychic medium come in, and he went through the whole house, ending with the basement. His whole demeanor shifted the moment he crossed the threshold, making myself and our other investigators slightly nervous. After all, they call me ghost bait for a reason. The medium made it clear no woman should be alone down there, seeing as there was a potentially demonic-like creature residing, potentially violent sexual being towards the back of the basement, as well as, sorry, I skipped a line, a small demonic-like creature residing in one of the old wells. So naturally, that's the exact opposite of what we did. Myself, as well as the female owner of the home, ended up going down there by ourselves. For some reason, when the lights go out, I get ballsy. It's going to get me in trouble one of these nights, that's for sure. So, I call out to the spirit and I say, "So I heard you like messing with women and being handsy with them. If you touch me, I'll start taking off articles of clothing." Stupid, right? Yes, stupid. Don't do that. But I couldn't argue with the results. I suddenly felt a firm finger go from the base of my neck, trail down my spine, and end up at my lower back. Before anything, I try to be a skeptic. I check for wires, things hanging from the ceiling, something, anything. Nothing was there. I told the owner to start taking pictures of me, and sure enough, there was a solid white mist wrapped around my body. So, both excited and perplexed, I started taking off my sweater. I kept my end of the deal and took off my sweater. Seconds later, I felt a hand rest at the small of my back. Then the owner gasped and said something brushed past her leg. There was an incredibly loud sound that could only be something heavy being dragged across the floor, straight to the well. was submitted by Sydney Hernandez from the Clyde Paranormal Investigations in Ohio. Sydney, that story gave me the chills. You are a brave girl. Number 7. As an early paranormal investigator, I used to use investigation equipment in my own home. Particularly this apartment I shared with my fiance for about 2 years. Overall, the spirits were pretty friendly and went about their own business, although a number of spooky things would happen every once in a while if we hadn't addressed them in some time. We were used to this. Then one summer, everything seemed to change. There was about a 2-week period where there was so much activity happening in our bedroom when we were trying to fall asleep that we just couldn't. Laying there in the dark, there would be creaking in the doorway. I originally thought it was the door being pushed that was causing the sound. Upon further investigation, the door didn't creak at all, but the floorboards in the threshold were creaky when weight shifted on them. As if the sound we were hearing at night was just someone standing there looking in at us. Things were being touched, tapped, flicked all over the room, loud enough to hear it. I had a large knick-knack shelf that had fallen off the wall twice and was laying on my dresser with all the decor still in it. After many nights of noises coming from this shelf, I emptied it and put it in a corner of the room. I also placed all the decor in a pile on my dresser and surrounded it with small pieces of selenite, just because it didn't work. That night, the shelf fell over, and the next day the selenite was moved like someone flicked it across the table. The energy overall was different from everything we were used to. It felt negative. Laying there without the covers on, suddenly I felt the need to cover up. Waves of energy would rush up on us while we were laying there with our eyes closed. In the daylight, I tried to investigate, asking who it was, why they would only bother us at night. I never got any clear answers to this. And then one day, it just stopped. I realized the timing of it all. We lived in a 2-family home on the 2nd floor. Our downstairs neighbors were just an elderly man and his caretaker. But during those few weeks, the caretaker's adult daughter and child came to stay with them. It wasn't a good situation. We eventually saw the police and social workers escort her away. And that's when I realized, whatever this energy was, it must have been attached to her. We didn't experience it again after that, and it opened my eyes to the possibility that a haunting might not necessarily be spirits attached to a certain place or object, but it could be your neighbor's negative attachment coming into your space, causing havoc. That story was submitted by Natasha Dominguez from Spectral Visions Paranormal. Number 8. We were investigating an old jail that has since been turned into a museum in Colorado. It was the team and I, as well as the museum shop employee, who were all in the building at the time. There is a basement to the jailhouse that is very cold and pitch black. In the basement, there are 2 wide-open rooms, as well as a smaller room that was called the Ice Room. It gets that name because it is really ice cold in there, and during the winter time, it is where the dead bodies would be stored. When the ground was so cold, it was too difficult to dig graves. So the jailhouse would store deceased inmates' bodies in the ice room until weather warmed up enough to dig the graves. There were 2 groups in this basement doing investigative sessions, one near the ice room and the other was in a wide open storage room, which is the group I was assigned to. Both groups had to speak quietly as not to disturb the other, as we were all fairly close together. While doing a flashlight session with my group, we started asking questions and got a response. When asked if the spirit communicating with us was an inmate, the flashlight started strobing, so we knew it could have very well been an inmate who passed away in the jail, seeing as we were in the basement. Suddenly we hear very distinct violin music coming from the room next to us, where the other group was. We all jump outskirts of Doncaster in the UK. The tunnel has reports of a ghostly girl who appears to you after calling out for the Mexborough wrecker. She is believed to be a gypsy girl who had been hit by a train in the tunnel after selling rags at the local market during the 1800s and died. I had a comment on my other video that said gypsy was a racist remark. I didn't write these guys. I would never be racist in any way. I love everyone equally. I'm not racist at all, so my apologies. Again, not my words. I'm not trying to offend anyone. Sorry. Okay. So she had died, and her mom was said to have cursed the tunnel and all who dared call upon her nickname. We investigated the tunnel and had heard knocks and sounds coming towards the back of the tunnel at times, but otherwise it was a relatively quiet night. We headed out of the tunnel, and our medium, Chrissy, was sensing a man standing and watching us from above the tunnel. We did some more investigating, and nothing really materialized, so we decided to call it a night and headed back toward the cars. We started to do a protection ritual on us leaving, and as we stood round, Chrissy began to speak, and I could hear walking coming from all around us. I opened my eyes, but nothing was there. So I shut them again, and once more I heard walking. So I opened my eyes again. Nothing was there. The third time I heard it, I opened my eyes, and I saw a torchlight and the figure of a man standing at the top of the path near our cars. I said to the others, "Someone is there." The man stood there and then shouted, "Police," and started to head towards my car. Chrissy shouted back, "What?" And he shouted again, "I'm the police." We started to walk toward our cars, and as we did, Chrissy shouted back at him, "Have you got an ID?" There was no answer. We watched him walk from the top of the hill to my car. He shined his torch directly into my car before he simply disappeared. When we reached the cars, he was nowhere in sight. The cars were surrounded by brambles, so he couldn't have snuck off into them. He hadn't ran back up the hill because we would have seen him. I checked under the car, around the cars, even looked for parked cars nearby to see if there was a way that he could have gone, and there wasn't. We were then left questioning who or what we had seen. I was quite shaken, and my thoughts were, if it was a real person, where could he have possibly have gone, and were we in danger? I went back home, and I asked a historian that I know to look into the area for me, and what he came back with was quite amazing. A man had died in the construction of the tunnel in the 1800s. He'd fallen from the top of the tunnel. Not just that, but in later years, numerous murders and suicides took place around the wooded area on the tunnel, meaning that a reenactment of a police officer would not be out of the norm. I also spoke to the local police, who stated that an officer wouldn't have been located in that area at that time on his own, and if he was indeed a police officer, he would have approached us further. The possibility that I had just seen my first apparition seemed more and more likely. My instinct was confirmed further when a local paranormal team approached me and said that they had also seen a man in the area. Maybe prior to this experience, I was too naive to think that a ghost could come across so strong and solid as we are, and could interact as well as he did. This leaves one question though, and that is, if ghosts can look as solid and physical as they did in life, how do we really know when we've seen a ghost? Submitted by Charlene Lowe Kemp from Paranormal Hauntings, Nottingham, United Kingdom. Number 10. Back in the 1980s, my husband and I were buying rundown old houses in Denver, renovating them and renting them out. Back then, you could buy good homes with... I cannot read. Okay. Back then, you could buy homes with good bones for very little money, so it seemed like a good retirement plan for us. We found a small white bungalow that was built in 1910. It's pretty trashed inside and out, but looked like a good project for us. simply dismissed the red stain and instead put a dresser in front of it so potential tenants would not see it. About 2 weeks after buying the house, I got a panicked phone call from my husband. I hurried over to the house and he was standing in the kitchen with the trap door down to the cellar lifted up. I looked down and, sure enough, raw sewage had seeped into the cellar all the way up to the level of the kitchen floor. Can you imagine? We called the city and they could not explain how that happened, and no other home in the neighborhood had experienced this flooding. The stink and smell of that sewage was unbearable. Eventually it went down and we cleaned that cellar from top to bottom. Shortly afterwards we rented the home to a nice young couple. My husband actually knew the man from his work and said he was a very mellow guy. 2 months later, we received a frantic call from his wife. She was crying hysterically and asking how she could get out of the lease. She said that ever since moving into the home, her husband had turned into a different person. Moody, nasty, and just plain mean. He became depressed and he would lash out in violence for no good reason. Confused, we canceled the lease and let them both move out. Several months and many tenants later, the same thing kept happening over and over. Seemingly happy couples would move into the house, and a short time later would get a phone call that the husband had turned into a monster. Women and children moved out in the middle of the night. Several domestic violence calls came to us from the local police. Baffled, we just decided to put the house on the market and get rid of it once and for all. About 2 years later, I was reading the Denver Post and my eyes caught the headline, "Woman Murdered by Husband on Front Porch." I scanned the article and my eyes grew wider and wider with disbelief. Not only was the address the very same house we used to own, it said that the husband moved into the house and inexplicably started beating on his wife, and finally just bludgeoned her with a hammer while she was sleeping on her front porch swing in broad daylight. The Hammer Murder House, as we called it, was eventually torn down, and a very modern building stands on that ground today. I often wonder if the inhabitants of the sleek new house experience all the ill effects from whatever macabre history still haunts that property. That was submitted by Rose Glenn, the Ghost Lady of Colorado. Yeah. Creepy. Okay, number 11. I was at Jefferson Davis Retirement Home in Biloxi, Mississippi. We were in the main part of the museum where there is a large auditorium. From the moment my investigation partner and I walked in, we had a strong sense of another presence with us. We started a spirit box session and we did not get many responses. After 15 minutes or so, we turned the spirit box off and we sat in silence to see if we could hear anything or get an EMF reading. We started hearing footsteps across the room, but when we walked over to investigate, the footsteps seemed to shift to the opposite side of the room. It was as if the spirit was avoiding us. Now in the auditorium, there are 2 sets of doors. On one side, there was a left door open. As we stood, watching some spikes on the EMF, I heard the distinct sound of a door closing. When I looked up, at you.